Hello and welcome to this edition of the Potomac Local Podcast. I'm your host, Uriah Kaiser, publisher of Potomac Local News. Today, we're talking about our local libraries in both Prince William County and the city of Manassas Park. Joining us on the podcast today are the directors of those respective library systems. Deborah Wright is the director of the Prince William County Public Library System, and Holly Ritchie is the director of the Manassas Park City Library. Ms. Wright has been the director since 2017, and Ms. Ritchie in the city since 2020. Thank you both for coming on the Potomac Local Podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes. So what I'd like to know at the top of this podcast and right here at the top of 2023, as it is January of 2023, we're having this conversation, is what's new at our libraries. It's been a busy year locally for our libraries, both in Prince William County and in Manassas City. Manassas City moved to a brand newly constructed library. Not only is Manassas Park City moved to a newly constructed library, and so that's a first. Because I think they have the newest facility and the most to smile about, maybe we'll start with Holly Ritchie at Manassas Park to talk about what's new at the brand new library in the city.
Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, we just opened our new library. We opened officially on September 11th, just a couple of months ago. We are open now 6 days a week, Tuesday through Sundays. We are not open on Mondays. Always like to mention that because we do get a lot of people that come in to the building. What's kind of interesting is that our new location, we actually share the building with the Manassas Park City Hall, as well as the school administration. It's all located in the new downtown that Manassas Park is developing currently. Our space is 3 times the square footage of our old temporary location at Blooms Park. So we are able to have a lot of different seating areas to kind of accommodate everyone. And then we have a couple of study rooms, which is very new. We did not have that in our old location. One of the biggest services that people really like of our new location is we have laptop kiosks. So people can just bring their library card up to the kiosk and check out a laptop for use anywhere in the library. They don't have to talk to the staff to get it. They just have to go straight up to it and check it out for that hour that they need. If they need longer, they can always talk to staff about extending their time as well.
So your new library is located at City Hall, and as
Yes.
you said, it's a new downtown development. The old City Hall in Manassas Park City was demolished to make way
Yes.
for this shiny new building that opened up this past summer. I was there for the ribbon cutting, and it was a big to do. It was very nice. And before you moved into this new location, you were at Blooms Park, which was the old General's Ridge golf course, and the city took that over and developed it into a passive park for walking and hiking. But before that, people in residents of Manassas Park, when they went to the library, they had to go to a library outside of the city. And so having a library inside the city it was Central Library was the closest to Manassas Park residents for both the city of Manassas and the city of Manassas Park. But having a library that Manassas Park residents can call their own is relatively new. That's a new concept, right?
Yes, we only opened in 2020.
And walk me, what's the reception that you're getting from the citizens of your city? Are they surprised? Are they happy? What are you finding? Anecdotally, what are you seeing as the residents now not only have the library of their own for the first time, but a shiny building to go to?
Yeah, they're very receptive to it. They're really liking that our programs are geared towards them. We always do surveys about what they are looking for. They all love Central. We hear about it all the time. They still enjoy going to Central, but they're also liking the fact that they have this additional resource in Manassas Park for them. So most of our patrons utilize both Central Library and our Manassas Park.
Do you know, is there certain services that's provided at Central that is not provided at Manassas Park, or is it just an old habit that's hard to break?
It's a little bit of both. They do have a full-blown makerspace now at Central. So we hear about that a lot, that people like to utilize that. Well, we have virtual reality and 3D printer here. The 3D printer is currently getting set up. So it's not in operation yet, but we don't have enough space to have a dedicated room currently for makerspace, which of course they do have at Central.
Well, Deborah is in charge of Central Library and the rest of the libraries in the Prince William County Library System. You also opened a new library in your system about this time last year in the city of Manassas.
We did. It was actually in 2021. I know it's hard to believe, but
wow.
yes, it was. COVID, everything is a blur. We did. Manassas City opened. We're able to open a branch, working closely with the city. We did have to realign some resources from Central to do this, but we're very happy that we were able to accommodate that. I think every community should have their own library, so I'm very supportive of that. It is also, much like Holly described, the citizens in that community right around that library absolutely love it and are very happy to have it close by.
Now, I'll tell you just anecdotally, after covering the city of Manassas and the council, the location that the Manassas City Library is in today in the Wellington Shopping Plaza, it might have been at one point, and it never was, a Meineke muffler shop. So some might argue that a library is a little more quieter than a muffler shop. Even though mufflers make cars quiet, it may not be as loud as that original use that was planned there. So, okay, well, so you have, so Manassas Park has its own library. The city of Manassas has now its own library.
Branch.
Before that, at its library branch. Before that, Central Library was the branch for really both of the cities, and it's still in existence.
Yes,
it's been upgraded in the past year and a half,
right.
and so has another Manassas area library, Bull Run. So talk about some of the upgrades we've seen in the Prince William County system.
Okay, sure. Central reopened with their massive renovation at the very end of 2020. Bull Run was closed at the beginning of 2022 and reopened in September. The difference being that Central is our oldest facility, needed some major overhaul in terms of plumbing. There was asbestos in the building, so we didn't know that until we started digging. But anyway, it's had a major renovation, which allowed us to redefine the spaces, update spaces. Of course, we did create the maker space there. Another thing that we did, service that we shifted, was our relic service, which is our local history and genealogy division, was moved to Bull Run when Bull Run opened in '94. In 2022, or actually 2021, sorry, we moved it back to Central. So our local history genealogy research area is now back at Central Library. Central Library also opened an outdoor space, Central Green, last spring, and it's thriving and doing very well. We've got a little story trail out there and some other interactive activities, and it's a great opportunity to have an outdoor space in a very urban setting there, with all the traffic on 28, but it's fenced in, so it's very safe for our smallest patrons. Bull Run is one of our moderately newer facilities, so it didn't need the same kind of overhaul, but the way the space was defined was very dated. And so we were able to redefine spaces for the use that our patrons have now, a lot more open area, less staff service desk footprint. So we created more patron space. We actually created truly a teen area. We had a defined teen shelving space, but it wasn't really as teen friendly as we wanted it to be. So they now have their own designated spot that's kind of got partially walled in and has some gaming options. They even created a little tween nook at Bull Run. And we created a small study room. These Holly mentioned in her building as well. Those study rooms, any kind of meeting space, but the study rooms, the community rooms, they're so popular everywhere. And so we had the larger community room at Bull Run, and we had a quiet study room for individuals to use, privately or individually. But for a small group to use a room, we really didn't have that set up. And yet Bull Run is a very bustling library. So it was nice to be able to provide that as well. And and they have a maker space. I think I neglected to say that. But yeah, so both Central and Bull Run have wonderful, we think, state-of-the-art maker spaces, and they are thriving for sure.
And let's dive just one follow-up question on the makerspace. What exactly is a makerspace for someone who is out there and doesn't really know what that might be?
Sure. We in library land, we've kind of gotten used to the idea, but we have folks who don't really know. So it's an opportunity, and every library decides for themselves exactly which equipment they're going to provide, because it's you can't have everything, but it's a hands-on opportunity. It might be sewing, crafting, it can be laser cutting. 3D printers are pretty much always present in a makerspace, but it's an opportunity for members of the community to come in and try something. They may have a need one time to come in and use an embroidery machine, and they never have another need. But what a great service that we can provide this. They learn something, they interact maybe with some other members of the community. But some people are deciding, do I want to invest in this myself? Let me try it out. Again, what an opportunity. They're learning something. There's that whole STEM aspect of it. We do try to provide some programming and activities for teens. So it's a different kind of experience, because you were talking about the Meineke shop. These are contained spaces, and I don't know that they generate a lot of noise, but you think about using any equipment as generating a little more noise than you think of your public library, at least when I was growing up. And I understand anecdotally that someone in one of the spaces was using one of the equipment and was even thinking about investing in equipment for themselves and starting a business. So,
really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's just, what I think is in the process of happening. I know it's happened in other libraries, is members of the community, hobbyists, whatever, who are kind of an expert in that particular activity or craft, often show up. You end up maybe developing some volunteers, and you just have people networking in the community for a shared interest that they've been able to discover at their public library.
So much has already been said on this conversation about how these libraries are meeting spaces and they bring people together. And we're coming out of the COVID pandemic, and we're taking off our masks, and we're getting back out in public. And Holly, I'll ask you, and Deborah, feel free to chime in as well. But how has the transition been for you to reopen your buildings? I know we were big back in 2020 and 2021 on curbside service and allowing people to call ahead and reserve materials and have them brought directly out. But when the buildings reopened, people were actually able to get back together. So how has the transition been for you, Holly? And walk us through what's new and different.
Yeah, we actually didn't feel it quite as much as some of the other systems since we opened in the pandemic. So our foot traffic was fairly low anyways, because we didn't exist before the pandemic.
And so you opened with curbside service only when you said, hey, we're open, but not really. We have to bring it out to your car.
We actually did not open only curbside. We opened fully when we first opened, just because we knew the foot traffic would be so low. Okay. Those who were more comfortable curbside only, we would definitely do curbside. But most people, since we were so small and kind of secluded, most people, if they walked in, they were the only one in the library. So they felt comfortable coming in, picking up the books, browsing the collection, and seeing what we had. The biggest shift for us was starting to do more and more in-person programming. We did open with only virtual programming because of the pandemic. So while our doors were open, we weren't seeing a lot of the traffic coming in for our programming. Ever since we started doing the in-person programs, the response from the community has been great. For a while there, we used to get people who would come to some of our programs from at least 45 minutes away, because we would be one of the few doing like an in-person story time. So those types of programs really were a need in the community, and not just ours. And so we never really went back to virtual. There was a period of time where some libraries started doing in person and then went back to virtual as the pandemic picked up again. We still weren't seeing the foot traffic that forced us to have to go back to virtual. So we've been in person completely for about a year and a half, which
Deborah,
is a little bit more.
Deborah, let me ask you, with the thought process of going in person and resuming events and inviting people back in the buildings for functions, what was, I mean, what was the impetus for that? Did you receive a lot of requests, emails, people saying, listen, we've got small children that need to interact, we've got adult meeting groups that, so what was the thought process to reopen?
Well, we were receiving that feedback as we started to learn a little bit more about, the virus and what was maybe safe and navigable and what wasn't. Yeah, our people did get pretty pushy, and I mean that in the best way. But I mean, they wanted, and exactly what you said. My children need to come in and browse the collection. I don't want you to bring the books to me to the car. We need to come in and look. They need to be able to pick out what they want. I want to pick out what I want. And they did want to come back to programs. And so we, like Holly said, we had a little more foot traffic than probably they did, but it was, we just worked on it as safely as we could at the beginning. Everybody's comfort level eventually, expanded. And now people, they're very happy. Programs are very popular. And I even noticed actually recently at a larger staff meeting, and when I say larger, like 20 some people, the positive energy in the room was it was palatable. And I think it's because people really have, meeting online is great. There's some conveniences that are hard to walk back, but the being in person and that energy being in the room all together, I think we've really seen the value of that.
We've turned a corner and we're back in person, and the buildings are open again, and events, groups are meeting, and things are happening. So as we look ahead to 2023, let's talk about some of the things that the residents can look forward to from their local libraries. And Deborah, I'll start with you.
Okay. For Prince William, and I think you may be aware of this already, Uriah, but we are in year 5 of our current 5-year strategic plan. So we will spend a big chunk of 2023 working on the next 5-year plan. I'm very excited about that. We've made, the pandemic made us take some twists and turns we weren't prepared for, but we still made great strides in how we provide services to our community. It just didn't look the way we thought it was going to in 2019. So we'll be working on that. We have some new technology. We are now circulating Chromebooks along with our hotspots. So we're always looking to try to meet needs where we can with technology. We have a mobile app we hope will be rolling out by the spring. And reinstating our Girls Who Code and some of our other STEM programs. And then we're continuing to expand our outreach services. Everywhere we go in the community, we continue to run into people who say, I didn't know my library had that. I didn't know I could do that at my library. I didn't know my library card would allow me to, download or stream or whatever the services that we provide. So we'll continue to push that message out.
And how is that growing? And I'll put this out to the both of you. The online services. I know in my household, we subscribe to Canopy, and that is an online service that allows us through our library card to get access to a lot of great content. Are you seeing that growing still post-pandemic? And is that something that's going to be with us for a little while longer? In terms of
yeah. I've had, and sorry, I'll let Holly answer too, but I've had actually even a library board member, a former library board member who was surprised to find herself enjoying electronic books, and who later told me, I'm never going back. So I think there are some people who we did see a spike in all of our digital resource use during the pandemic, especially during shutdown. And while we have reopened our doors and people are checking out the physical materials, the usage hasn't dipped much on the digital. So we're now, providing resources for both audiences. So I don't think that will change.
I agree as well. We have a much larger collection here than we did in our little library. And so obviously we've seen a increase in our physical circulations, but the use of our digital library, it has also increased, as the awareness of our new building has allowed more people to realize that we are here. We've seen a huge increase on those, especially on some of our newer digital resources. We recently got Canopy, to mention that as well. And then we also have the Shelf, which is a newer streaming service, very similar to Canopy, but it's for Spanish speakers. It's all Spanish based. So we have that as well here, and we're seeing those numbers pick up as well.
And full disclosure, Canopy is not sponsoring this conversation, so I just want to put that out there, let everyone know. For so long we have talked about what libraries should add, the types of services that should be added at libraries, and whether those are hotspots or Chromebooks or enlarging the collection, whether it be tangible books or online resources. But here's now that we're coming out of the pandemic, have we learned what maybe libraries should scale back on as we look before the pandemic hit and what we were doing and compared to what life is like today? Has there been any areas where you said maybe we'll scale back in that and pivot and do something else?
Holly, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, it really depends sometimes on the community. So it's overreaching. It's kind of difficult to say, but in terms of collection, one of the things that I know a lot of libraries are running into is books on CDs and actual CDs. We've really cut back on those, not just because of the pandemic, but just in general, cars don't have CD players anymore. And that's where most people listen to them. So rather than focusing on the physical audiobooks, it turns into the digital audiobooks so that people can use their device in their car.
Yes, I would agree with Holly. We have, and I think we've pretty much about eliminated or in the process of eliminating our music CDs. Same thing, people are streaming. And we do have services through not just Canopy, but Hoopla and Overdrive or Libby. And so, yeah, exactly what she said. I think it's the formats that's changing. It's not the product itself. People still want music. They want viewing, whether it's television, movies, whatever, but how they're going, and they want to listen to a book, but how they're getting to it is different. And that's where so those are physical materials that no longer maybe are taking up the spot in our buildings, but we're providing that service digitally.
I want to go back to the year 2015 when Prince William County opened not one, but two library branches. And I know, Deborah, you were, this was before your time as director, but I do believe you were around at that time.
Assistant director,
and
yep.
You might be able to attest that we saw a library branch open in Montclair, the Montclair Community Library, and we saw the Haymarket Gainesville Community Library open on two opposite ends of the county, the Montclair in the east, Haymarket Gainesville, obviously, in the west. And at the time, there was these comments saying, listen, it's 2015. People are online now. The internet is the proliferation of the information that's online. So why would we build structured libraries for people to come in and check out books? But since that time, we continued to see the interest in people wanting to go out to a library has only grown. So talk to me, and why do you think that is?
I think, and in addition to Haymarket, Gainesville, and Montclair, we opened the City of Manassas branch, and Holly's opened the Manassas Park Library. So that's 4 libraries in our community proper that we've opened since 2015. I know I was the assistant director when those libraries opened, and yes, I saw those same comments. I think, well, as we've said here, I think, and maybe we wouldn't have known this in 2015, but after being shut down and forced to be isolated, people were very happy to come back together. So I think the sense of community is very strong, and we like to think libraries are a very welcoming and inclusive space. And I know that sounds very jargony, but we really do, as librarians, we really do live by those values. We try to appeal to all members of our community, from families with small children to all ages of learners, to people in the job market, or people who are, small business owners who maybe need resources. So I think the sense of community is probably the biggest factor. And then it's a neutral space, and it's a free space. I mean, your tax dollars are paid for, but you're not coming in and swiping a credit card to use our services. And the other thing that I would say too is not everybody in our community has equal access to the internet and to digital resources. And so libraries can provide an access Just as we've always provided that access to print and physical materials, now we're helping to provide that digital access, whether it's through our free Wi-Fi, whether it's lending hotspots, whether it's using an actual computer device. Holly has the laptops. We have desktops, that people come in and use. So I think those things are big factors. And I think sometimes people also, even if they work from home, they just want to get out of their home and they will come and work in a quiet space in our buildings. And I know I have some branches where it's very quiet. It's like a giant study hall. I was in one not too long ago, and the branch manager said, people are very serious here. They come, and whether it's students, that we think of under 18, or whether it's adult learners, and they come and they spend hours just doing their work in the library. So they may be using our resources, but they may just be using our space.
Yeah, we noticed the same thing here. We have a couple of remote workers who, their kids are at home either because of homeschooling, or it's just they're not quite old enough for in-person schooling yet. And we have some who bring in 2 screens. They bring in their own laptop and they bring in a secondary screen, and they set up shop all day and somewhere in the library, and they just work. We see them from the time we open until they've hit their 8-hour workday.
Well, that again, and I'll be honest. I've worked in both the I've worked all over Prince William County, and the libraries being, the nature of my job sometimes puts me in, so many different locations. I was most recently at the Haymarket Gainesville location, but I've worked in Montclair and Chen, and I work obviously in the Fredericksburg region and their libraries as well. And I can attest to that. So it's good that we see that. Now, when you say bring in 2 screens, I have not done that, but I have seen some things. I've seen people bring in old desktop computers with them and set them on the desktop. Yep. And plug it in. I've seen that. And so maybe that's a whole nother, Friends of the Library page or something, weird things seen at the library. Maybe that's a whole other segment we could talk about at a later date. But I can certainly attest to that. Just 2 other things I want to touch on before we wrap up. And one of the first is how can residents be more supportive of their library? I mean, obviously, you have the backings of your respective local governments, and they're the funders, and you have your board of supervisors and city council, but the people who utilize their services, that what you do every day, how can they get more involved and support what you do?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the level of involvement they want to do. I know that at Prince William, they have a Friends of the Library group. We are trying to develop one over here at Manassas Park City Library System. So there's always that. There's always volunteering, just specifically at locations as well. And then sometimes it's just a matter of being vocal on like social media or with their friends and family, saying, hey, I've attended these programs at my local library. You should come and join us. Or sharing our posts about different programs so that the word gets out there to more people. We can only reach so many people, and it can be difficult sometimes to reach those that aren't already coming in. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the biggest ways that they can support, is just helping us get the word out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Deborah, if you would talk about your friends group and tell us what it is for those who may not know it exists.
We actually have 7 friends groups and a library foundation. So we have 8 of these 501c3s who support Prince William Public Libraries. Our 6 larger branches each have a friends group, and that's Potomac, Central, Bull Run, Chin Park, Haymarket, Gainesville, Montclair. And then when Manassas City opened, the city really wanted there to be a friends group for that branch. So they do fundraising activities, primarily book sales, but they will venture out and try some other things to raise funds, which they then turn over to their respective branches to support programming activities. Most of our programming activities, the things you think about, petting zoos, puppet shows, musicians, the reptiles, any of those things, they're not paid for out of our regular operating funds. So the Friends support helps to pay for those programs. The Library Foundation is very similar, slightly different. They they're a little bit more they do a little more advocacy, I guess, in a political way or in a business world kind of way, but they also help to generate funds. They also are our organization that receives grants on our behalf. So we've been able to receive some grant funding, which again supports things like our outdoor Central Green initiative, some of the pollinator gardens, those types of things. So those are ways any of our community could donate to those groups. They could join those groups. They could volunteer, as Holly said, and share, absolutely promote to their friends and family. Because again, people still don't all know what all we have to offer. And the other thing I would add to that, I'm assuming this is probably true for Manassas Park as it is for Prince William, they can certainly talk to their elected leaders and just encourage them to provide more budgetary support to their local libraries. Manassas Park may have, not to speak for them, but they may have plans for even a bigger building. We certainly could use more library facilities within Prince William County for the size, for our geography, and for our population. According to our own planning, comprehensive plan, we could certainly use more libraries. So those are ways that people can, if they feel strongly. But what Holly said really, I think was really good. Just spread the word.
Well, I appreciate that. And Deborah, since you kind of opened the door, now I have to do the reporter thing and ask, are there plans for a bigger building in Manassas Park? I just have to ask.
Not at this time.
Okay,
we did just open our brand new building.
Good. Okay, I assume that, but I didn't want to just leave that hanging out there. Finally, I wanted to get some stats from you, if you could just give me some ballpark figures about the number of people that your libraries serve on an annual basis, and maybe the size of your respective collections. Can we start with Manassas Park first?
Sure. So it's tough for me to give you a full number in terms of an annual, since we did just move in to the new space, but I can say that about monthly, we have been serving about 3,000 people a month. So which is about 3 times the size or number that we used to. So that's about 36,000 people a year. If it continues, I'm hoping it will grow, but that's kind of where we're at currently. In terms of our collection, are you talking like the size of the collection?
Yeah, just the number of, maybe just the number of titles that you have. I mean, and again, a ballpark, not looking for a specific, but.
Yeah, so ballpark number is we have about 15,000 materials currently, physical materials currently in the building. And that goes from hotspots, which we also have here, launch pads, box books, and in addition to the DVDs and regular books that most places have as well. And then physical or digital items, it's way more, and I can't even begin to give you a number because like Hoopla, Canopy, those all have so many that I can't even ballpark that.
Yeah, well, 3,000 people a month is actually very impressive, because the city's population it's obviously much smaller than Prince William County, and so I will say that that's a pretty impressive number. So
very good number.
I hope that continues to grow. And for you, Deborah, would you mind just answering the same?
Okay, so I actually have a document that we had prepared for fiscal 22. So we have roughly 919,000 physical items in our collection, so almost 500,000. And as Holly said, I actually have some of those numbers. So her numbers may be very comparable for digital. Items on Libby and Overdrive, 26,000, and items on Hoopla, I don't have the Canopy numbers, but Hoopla is over 1.2 million something. And then our visits, the number I have in front of me, I think we combine both physical visits and website visits. I do want to say our typical library building across the county, I think it's roughly close to 1 million visits per year. So, obviously our bigger buildings, our busier buildings have higher numbers. Chin Park, Bull Run, Haymarket, Gainesville are all very busy. But that's, yeah.
And both of you, I assume that you envision these numbers growing as the population continues to grow.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Gotcha. Holly Ritchie is the director of the Manassas Park City Library. Deborah Wright is the director of the Prince William County Public Library System. Thank you both for joining us here on the Potomac Local Podcast. And for you who've been listening, thank you so much for spending time with us and learning more about the local libraries in your community. And we hope that you go and check one out today where you are. We'll talk to you next time here on the Potomac Local Podcast.